Hello and welcome to a Ruddy esports podcast where, in line with our recent quite hilarious settings of voracious variety, we've gone from Kazi's bed and we're now in what would appear to be this is like the back rooms. This is like a very liminal space. We're in kind of a room that is weirdly too small to be an office, but they've not really used it for anything. I think due to its kind of quite weird size. We're on a couple of beanbags in here, and I'm worried that when you start talking in a second, I mean, the echo in here is quite incredible.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that, but yeah, this is going to be like the content room.
Do you think
we just moved in? You know,
if they make a Skyrim sequel, that you could play the Dragonborn?
A Dragonborn? Oof, you tickled my ego, man. I think yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. The shouting, that doesn't come naturally to me, but when I'm pissed, it's easy. So someone just needs to piss me off.
For sure.
And then I could be a Dragonborn.
He doesn't always. I guess it is kind of shouting always, isn't it? That's the whole point of the language.
Point, yeah, you're doing the dragon shouts.
Yeah, that game was good. The guy. I don't know who voiced Parthenax. I can't even remember. I just remember listening to that voice.
It was the voice of Optimus Prime, no?
I want to say that's
like
true.
Tychus Finlay, Optimus Prime, and then the dragon. I think it was some shit like that, no?
You must have had so many offers to do voice acting over the years.
Never.
Really?
Never, man. Everyone always says you should be a voice actor. It's like, how the fuck do I do that, man?
You've never had an offer to do that? That's so interesting.
Never.
That is very intriguing.
I wish I would be down.
Maybe you've got to think that maybe if they do some sort of League of Legends related MMO, there's surely a character out there for you.
I could be like a villain, maybe.
Shyvana's dad. Hello, it's me, Shyvana's dad.
I'd be so protective, you know. People did the whole thing where Ezreal wants to lick her thigh. I'd be pissed at Ezreal then.
Yeah, of course. You'd
You
be like
remember
that.
that
You remember all those films with it would be every film that has 50 Cent or a tough black guy where their daughter comes home from the prom with a guy and they're checking them out.
Like 21 Jump Street.
Yeah,
Ice
21
Cube.
Jumps. Yeah, Ice Cube, that kind of vibe. That would be you.
I'd be Shyvana's
This is what I love about the interviews because we've been going for 3 minutes and we're already talking about you being Shyvana's dad and protecting her from potential suitors on Summoner's Rift. Hello, Yamato, and welcome to the podcast. We're meeting you under an auspicious star, is what I will say.
What does auspicious mean?
I don't know. The reason I said that is because
I don't know what it means.
Well, I'll explain using anecdotes because I don't like to be direct, you know.
Okay.
But I used to play a game called Crusader Kings a lot, and there was an event where, in Crusader Kings, anyone that's played it in the comments will know, it's very text-based. Things will happen, you have to make a choice, and it's text. And it would be one of the events would happen is you'd have a son that was born, and then it would kind of be a prophecy. It would be the child was born under auspicious stars, which would be there's an uncertainty in the atmosphere. And I wanted to use that now because it reminded me of what's going on at the moment. There's a degree of uncertainty at least.
I guess, yeah. It's what we've experienced is definitely a text-based game where a son is born and things are uncertain. The son being the new roster, and
well, all it takes is a U for a sun to be a orbital, helial source of light.
Yeah, true. That's the goal. Yeah, we want to be the son of the LEC. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And now we've gone full circle. I think we ended there.
Thank you for coming. The goal is always to be very cyclical in our interviews. It's good to achieve it so early on. But I think it's fair to say, I think the interesting thing for me is from everyone else, there is a direct spectacle at the moment because I think half of people, you can't quite directly cut it in half, especially not because, when I went to EMEA finals in Montpellier, this is not me trying to, lick the dingleberries out of the gooch of Karmine Corp in any way, but it was remarkable to me that in that MRS KC final, even though it's in France, I think quite possibly 95% of the people there, maybe 98% of the people there were there for Karmine Corp. And for them to fill out an arena in that way, it was really quite incredible. So that's why I'm saying it might be hard to say 50-50 because I think the fan base is massive. But it feels like there's a very interesting thing where a lot of people want to see you guys fail. A lot of people.
Of course. Yeah, of
And
course.
I know from speaking to you and knowing you personally that that's something that I would imagine was a major motivator going in.
No, for me, like, the main reason I wanted to join Casey, it's like, I guess I can go even a step back. The main reason I was streaming and co-streaming was, first, I just wanted to be building like a foundation that I could call my own, right? It's like going through esports, and I guess you could see that in different walks of life too, is there's a degree of uncertainty when you rely on the decision-making of people above you, right? So
100%.
I wanted always to be in a position where I'll be fine on my own. And at the same time, I wanted to be very careful with the choices I make in terms of which team I want to join, because for a large period, I think whenever I join a team, which might sound strange, every time I join a team, I join with the intention of staying there for pretty much the rest of my career.
Yeah, you think of retiring there every time.
Yeah, because I think this is the only way to really function, because then you nurture every aspect of it. And when things happen that maybe you disagree with on a philosophical level, you begin to fight it, and you want to, of course, be, moving things in a direction that makes sense for you personally, right? And there's been times, right, I understand, it's like I have no, ill intent towards any of the past folks that I worked with. My Vitality times were great times, and they decided to move in a different direction with, at the time they signed Duke, and with Fnatic 2, they went a different direction, and then they asked me to come back in spring. But the main thing for me was, it's like, I want to make sure that I align on a philosophical level, and I got to interact with many parts of KC in general, and I feel like from outside I always got the impression that they're doing things the right way. The involvement and the care and the nurture they have for the culture is something that really, let's say, bleeds through. And I think that the fans can really see that. It's like, is definitely like the main motivating part. And I think in terms of the energy that the fans bring and what they bring to the table, I think anyone that is against it are being completely ridiculous, because I think KC fans are the best fans in Europe, and I don't think it's even close.
It would be difficult for me to disagree. I think I'm very happy, at least at the moment, to be, and the first day I went to the LEC was not the opening day, it was the Saturday. And I think it is probably, I've not been around for too long. Like, the last couple of years have been the only real times I've been to LEC or seen any league events. I went to Worlds in London in like 2014 or 2015, I can't remember. 2014, I think. But that is just the idea that on a Saturday, second day of the LEC, could be that electric.
Yeah.
Sort of like feeling like I was going to an Arsenal match at White Hart Lane. Not quite that, because I don't think we're there. But the idea that could even be 20% of that is really quite astounding to what it was before. What I thought was, with no offense to anyone involved in the working of it, because I think they try very hard, what has been like a very sedated product in terms of drumming up excitement, I think. And for something that I think for a lot of people, when you look at some of the drama interpersonally that happens, the example I always use is like El Yo is smiling, or like someone cracks a little thing, like, oh, why isn't he looking him in the eye? We want to make altars out of molehills, in the sense that we want to create the big moments that the sport has. We're searching for these moments that is like, where is our Jose Mourinho saying, I am the special one? There isn't really that. And I think now, with all this national rivalry that's come in, for me, one of the big changes I've noticed is there's almost this curtain has fallen. This facade of emotion where everyone is not afraid to be passionate. I think a lot of fans in Europe right now, and in a lot of other regions as well, suffer from this major problem that they are afraid to passionately and obsessively support a team because they think it's cringe.
Yeah.
And KC is really the first example. I think Koi as well, to give them their credit. Are teams that people are not afraid to unabashedly scream their head off about supporting, which is a really beautiful thing, because that's a major barrier of entry for esports, and I think legitimizing it.
Yeah, I think the keyword is just passion, because I think like real raw passion is so infectious, and I think it translates regardless of what you're doing. It's like I remember like you sometimes you're scrolling through YouTube and all of a sudden you're watching like blacksmithing videos, and there's this dude who's insanely enthusiastic about hitting pieces of metal, and in some shape or form that's
and you can't help but watch.
It's very, very intriguing, and I think that the passion of Casey has now invoked the opposition. I think whenever there's signs of emotion, right, I think this is a sign of life. So it's like when I tweet now, it's like all the Spanish fans come in and they come and they attack me, they crack jokes. I love it, Same thing with the KC fans. They are so supportive. They are diehard fans. They want to, really be there along the whole journey to really feel, let's say, the full benefit of the reward, because you have those team floppers, it's not the same, when you jump teams and you just follow whoever's successful. There isn't the same level of, let's say, commitment to something. And I think it's very akin to like the love for sports teams. Yeah, I think just passion is at the key of everything. And I'm happy, that Casey has sparked other teams also to get very involved. It's like Koi was a part of the league last year, and of course they had their own issues and so forth, but they didn't find that level of engagement, right? It's like now they have another chance to do things right, and I think that's super, super good. I think it's good that Koi is a part of the league too, and I think for anyone, I think anyone should, at that level, should have a chance to let's say, redeem themselves. But I'm hoping that they do things right and don't jump to the next team. Like, I don't want to see Team Heretics Koi next year or in 2 years.
It was interesting with Mad because I mean, sometimes I'm so worried to get into like industry specifics, but like the whole thing with Mad is they're owned by like a Canadian company, I'm pretty sure, that does like events and shit, and they have like a stadium in Canada, I'm pretty sure.
I thought it was like the Boston Bruins.
Something like this. I'll get the actual clarification up on screen because quite often I talk out my absolute arse. It happens. But it was interesting with them because they sort of acquired what was originally a Spanish brand and then had a major issue for years in terms of resolving the disconnect between what was an English audience somewhat and then also like I think the LVP team and whatnot. But it's interesting to see because you felt like for years they were just going to kind of stick with it. And I think from speaking to people at Mad, because I got quite friendly with quite a few of them, they were sort of the assumption where like, yeah, we're probably not going to commit too heavily to the Spanish thing. We've kind of we've done some metrics and we've realized that it's not really there. It's interesting to see them do a 180. And I think that came from, you saw everyone getting kicked over there. Like you saw like Pad and like all of those guys get kicked and tweet about it. And I think the surprise indicates that is a complete 180. They did not expect it to go in that direction. But I think that
was it a surprise though?
I think so. I think a surprise in the sense of I think come that sort of July, August period where you're coming into LEC finals, maybe Riot out Worlds, maybe they had more of an idea. I don't think they would have anticipated, and I mean, you've got to imagine these are this is like 6-month periods. I don't think they would have anticipated that Mad would fully pivot, hire full Spanish staff, get rid of everyone, and go towards that direction, because there's multiple ways in which you can do these things, right? Yeah. But I suppose from their direction, it's similar to, you guys have the luxury. It's immensely difficult, but you're restarting a culture, from the ground up. Obviously, you're expanding into LEC. You can make that within its roots. And like, not everyone who works there is French. Like, I've heard people speaking English outside. Like, but obviously the core of it is like still very French, I can imagine. But it was interesting to me with them how hard they pivoted towards that. But I think that like you're saying there with the Koi Man thing, I think that's a partnership that makes sense.
I think it's definitely like a bit of a no-brainer, right? I think the sheer size of the fan base of Ibai and his connection with the Spanish community, I think just simply being a part of it is already so impactful in terms of what the metrics are, right? I think the main thing for me, right, in terms of why I felt that the thing, like this whole the Spanish squad happening was fairly obvious already, like before MSI, and I think this is something that could have been managed better. I think it's perfectly fine to.
I get what you're saying from that perspective.
It's very, very fine to plan for your future, right? But I can imagine what you go through going into like battle as a squad, knowing that a part of the project already has like 1 foot out the door.
I think when I say surprise, and I want to clarify, so when I talk about like Mad Lions being surprised, I think it's very much that thing of like, we always understand and are very conscious of like looming threats that can happen, but we always have the mindset of like, oh, but it never happened here though.
Yeah.
Because I think that the culture is so embedded, and I think when you rip something out from the roots, you never really expect. It's not like shelling a few petals.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I think that's more so what I meant. But yeah, I would agree with you.
Because definitely, like, I agree with the notion that like Mad, it's like I always appreciated what Mad did in essence, that they worked with like, of course, I'm sleeping on his name for some reason, Mac and Pat, of course. And I think for any coach, like you're envious of that you can just build something that is your own. And I think
had a very dynastic approach in comparison to
It was like that was Mr. Wenger, It's like he was working with his arsenal, and there was full trust and full commitment, and the staff was built in a way to support the weaknesses and the strengths. And
for sure,
I think in the end, it's like the truth of business hits anyone, right? And it circles back to what I mentioned earlier. It's like I want a team to be like the team that I retire in. I want to retire in KC. I want to stay in KC for the rest of my career. But sometimes, business is business,
I think that is the harsh reality. I mean, it's interesting we're having this conversation now because I just interviewed Trimby earlier today, the podcast with him.
Yeah.
And he's someone that I think no one would have predicted being jobless at this point. I mean, like, I think no matter which way you paint it, in the worst bad faith interpretation, I don't think you would be able to label him as lower than a top 4, top 5 support in LEC.
Yeah.
And the idea for him to be like competing for the scraps, I mean, he said it himself, like he would play anyway. He doesn't really care about the money.
Yeah.
And to then still have difficulty. I mean,
timing is a hell of a thing. Like,
yeah. I think what people don't realize is a lot of the time as well, people will look at it and they'll be like, well, why isn't he on that team? Well, it's because 3 teams weren't looking. 2 teams thought that he was going somewhere else. Yeah. It ends up being something like that. Do you know what I mean? You're actually only going for 2 spots some of the times, even if there's 10 teams.
Like on my end too, right? It's like if KC wouldn't have gotten into the LEC, I would have passed up on every offer. So I have zero interest to go to North America. I was just waiting for KC to join the LEC. That was the team for me to join.
When did you first sort of have that desire? Because you obviously dabbled a little bit in the Coup de France.
It was, like I was willing to even join KC in the LFL because my impression, a very strong impression of what their core beliefs were things that really aligned with mine. And in terms of my esports experience, I think I'm at a point where I know very clearly what I want. And with my conversations, every time I got like tidbits and just, pieces of information from KC, it always confirmed the same thing. And after the bootcamp, it also confirmed the same thing. It's like everyone works very close together. Everyone gives full support and full trust. Even now, right? We had a problem once, that people went out to smoke and they just linger, And the breaks turn from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. I had to do a clear-cut break.
It's called a paid poo, where I'm from.
Paid poo?
Paid poo, 9 to 5. Worker makes a cent, boss makes a dime. That's why I poo on company time.
I like it.
Tell this guy's never had a 9 to 5.
I definitely did. I think I did that unintentionally. It's like I definitely went to the toilet during every class. It was kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You have 3 lifelines. It's like you can go to take a shit once, you can piss once.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah.
I had a kid who there was this kid in my school. It was my science class, and he used to every couple of weeks he would be like, because we had this weird thing, like you had music lessons, so sometimes like you would like be exempt from your class and you'd go to a music lesson.
Okay.
And this kid was like, I have a violin class right now with a teacher. he did this for 6 months, and it was revealed after 6 months this kid does not play the violin. Never played the violin.
That's sick. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was basically like I mentioned before we were talking about like my friend group in high school, right?
Yeah.
It's like we were basically like trying to get through school by doing as little as possible.
Lazy genius.
But doing a lot to do less.
That's always the thing. I think it's like trying to push the boundaries of how much you can get away with when you're that age.
Yeah.
There was almost I don't know, I think with my friend group similarly, there was a similar mindset.
We would we would share all the tests with one another. We would share all the homework with one another. We would we would basically have a rotating thing where we would record just reading the whole book.
Yeah.
And then we would just have headphones on while we're doing the test. And then we would sometimes just hide a book in the toilet.
Yeah.
Like not in the toilet, but in the roof of the toilet.
Yeah, you got to do that.
And that's the same
one.
thing. We were also calling it like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you know? Like basically you have 3 lifelines. You can go to the toilet once, otherwise it's suspicious. So it was a classic. It was always finding ways of doing less.
Without any kids in school, you know, we're in January, close to February now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good few months before your exams. Now is the time to start
cheating.
Not cheating. Like now you can start suggesting in subtle ways that you have bladder issues. Because if you set it up now, come exam time, there's no doubt.
You're just like 14. It's like I have a swollen prostate.
Literally. Listen, if I could improve some of my grades, it's worth shitting yourself in class a few times, maybe once or twice. Come exam, no one will question you. Shit.
That's a commitment. That's a commitment.
You got to be committed. I mean, you're clearly committed to this project.
Of course.
That much
of course, yeah.
That much we've ascertained so far.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting when you talk about one of the things I want to check you on and make sure that we explore, because like a lot of people out there will hear you say, "Oh, you really like the culture and you like really align with some of Casey's values." The contrarian and people that will take that as a bad faith interpretation will be like, "Oh, you just like the clicks, you just like the people." You know what I mean? Like XYZ and stuff like this. So like, let's explore and unpack. What is the philosophy that you so keenly align yourself with? What are some of the values at Karmine Corp that make you attracted to it?
So it starts with how the off-season conversation was, right? It's like there was full and complete trust in terms of how they set up the process for the off-season. Was pretty much they wanted to get the head coach first. And it was between me, Striker, and Mac at the time. And they wanted to get the head coach first, and they had full transparency the entire way. They were talking to me about what conversations they were having, how they were moving forward, and full transparency all along the way. And then the conversations evolved into, it's like, what do I believe we need to succeed, right? And I laid out my plan, and they gave, their feedback and their input, and it was something that was concocted together with the inputs of everyone. At the time, for example, when I joined Fnatic, the circumstances were very different. But when I joined Fnatic, all decisions had already been made. Like we were playing with Selfmade and the roster and everything was done. And I was more of a last piece than anything else. And in KC, it's like everyone's here on the ground. It's like Amito's been here, Kote has been here, Clement has been here. Everyone's giving full support. Even now, in the context of 06, they have the same understanding that I have of the circumstance of what winter split actually means. And usually when things go bad, I think this is where you are tested. And in a lot of organizations, people like to press just panic buttons. It's like, oh, we need to get in and we need to have individual meetings with everyone. We need to change everything. We need to
make incisions right at the root.
Yeah, we need to fix everything. We need to fix everything now. Everything is bad, but they provide us with the higher ups in this case, our GM Clement, provides us with another perspective and full support in what we want to achieve. It's like the agreements we had at the beginning of the season are also true now, regardless of the result, because our understanding of what winter split is, it is a question of how you use your time in order to improve and prepare yourself for then the later splits. When you're 0-6, there's a greater challenge in the fact that you need to make sure that all of the agreements are still intact in terms of the trust and the overarching goal of what you want to achieve with this group. And they follow that line of logic and thinking. And this, to me, reinforces the idea, full trust, full commitment, full support all the way. And the agreement is intact regardless of what happens, And there's been situations in my past where things, where there was not that cooperation with upper management. It was rather than a cooperation and a synergy, it was a war of me fighting for things that are necessary and them arguing against. And then there was a question of, sometimes you're in a situation where high-ups need to prove to high-ups what they provide. So they're going to just put their fingers on things that are good and point fingers at others when they're doing something bad, right?
Yeah, it's like kind of the annoying invisible elevator of bureaucracy whereby there is such a nondescript chain of command whereby, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this. This is above my pay grade. Well, bring me to whoever's pay grade it is and I'll talk to them directly. Oh, sorry, they're busy. They've got a meeting. They can't talk to you today. But yeah, that's one of the annoying things that can happen, I think, for sure. And I think a lot of... God, it's weird not to kind of dive into any sort of like populist imagery, but I feel as if Karmine Corp represents, at least in what you're saying there, from everyone I speak to a lot of the time in regards to a lot of LAC orgs, GM management and stuff like this, it does feel like there needs to be a draining of the swamp, so to speak.
Yes, I would say so. But I think also human nature, I think just because it has a way of showing up, regardless of whatever walk of life. It's like sometimes I talk to my friends.
Vital signs you were talking about.
It's like I have friends right in Sweden. It's like they work a construction job, and the issues that they have with their management are issues that appear in esports too. I think it's just a question of sometimes people want to protect their own ego and protect their own, let's say, way of life and also their job because it's tied to your safety. And I think it's natural to be very defensive and
absolutely,
want to put yourself in a position where you never show weakness. But I think that's the opposite of responsibility. It's like here, for example, after the last game we played, it's like the draft was terrible. The preparation was needed to be a lot better, and the guys barely had a chance to play. I take ownership for that, right? Because I am the person who throws the spear that is sharpened by everyone's mind when it comes to the preparation, right? And I took ownership for that, and I should feel free to do so. And in some circumstances where you feel like you need to be defensive and afraid for your, let's say, your job, right? I think these are the moments where some people tend to point fingers, But I always think if in the long term, what I want things to represent, I want people to want to take ownership, I want to represent the values I want in others, I want to lead by example. And to come back to your initial question, right, in terms of what Casey have like represented to me.
Cool. So we got cut off there a little bit. You were saying about go back to the question about.
What I wanted to just add is I think it's like the story of Casey. Everything has been done the right way and in increments. There was no jump instantly to the LEC. There was no jump to anything. It's like every aspect of what they were actively competing in League of Legends. I'm not so well versed in Casey's history in other games. I know that they had like a TFT champ and they were Rocket League champs, I believe. But nevertheless, it's like LFO2 was super important. LFL1 was super important. Like everything, the essence of everything they wanted to achieve, it's like they didn't half-ass things. Waiting for something. Whatever they interacted with, they wanted it to represent them at every level. And I have a very, very deep appreciation for that. It's kind of like the way of the samurai, it's like you practice with your blade, but also in terms of how you do your calligraphy, it needs to, needs to be precise, and you need to do everything with a sense of honor because it's a reflection of you. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I think it's not just that. I mean, it's about, fear the man that has practiced one kick 1,000 times over 1,000 kicks. But I think it also relates to when you talk about that jump. I mean, it's about skipping steps, isn't it? I think when you look at some people, they want to skip steps. And I think once you don't get those fundamentals down, it becomes very vapid and vacuous. And I think that's one of the problems that a lot of these LEC orgs have, is I think they jumped a major step when it came to franchising in terms of, how do we get a load of money together? And you kind of miss in terms of like brand synthesis, because when you look at a lot of these orgs, you look at them and you're sort of like, well, what is this org and what does it represent from a top-down perspective, and where did it come from? And the question you have to ask for a lot of these orgs is, where did it come from? It came from VC money. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
That's not a,
There's very little soul in that.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, it has to go. Money always has to come from somewhere. But, in Hollywood, VC money normally buys you a scriptwriter, and it normally buys you a director, and then they turn that money into a thing. I feel like in the LEC, it sort of just buys you a logo and a name, and that's kind of it, which is not really much.
Yes, there's definitely teams that are like that. We don't need to mention names, but you mentioned draining the swamp. I feel like, with time, I think it will slowly move in that direction. Like, we are in esports winter. It's like an economical winter. It's like we just read the news of Riot laying off people, right? And I have this impression, right, that passion will remain. It's like when people want to make a profit and think about esports in the light of just, I want a return, I think that's where you lose the soul,
Yeah, I did want to touch on that briefly because it was news that has kind of rocked me quite differently, seeing quite a few friends.
Yeah, many people we know. It's messed up.
Yeah, very messed up. I wanted to, in particular, I made a post about it on Twitter earlier. One of the people that was affected the most, directly affected me, I don't know if you're particularly familiar with him, Jan, who's
that was so shocking to me.
PR leads for EMEA, and to give context, I tweet about this a little bit, but he main point of contact for any interviews, any journalist in EU knows him and probably would have encountered him internationally if you worked at MSI or Worlds. And I can't really attest to the fact that he's sort of, in terms of my personal development, I'm getting a little bit shaky in my voice, God. In terms of my personal development as an interviewer, and just in terms of confidence, because I think, not to get into any interpersonal politics, but there's so much bullshit and bureaucracy. There's so many journalists. I've got stories of some of the big wigs coming up to me and saying things that have really shaken my confidence. And he's someone that, from a Riot side, has always kind of been like, "Hey, what you do is really important," and always fought for my corner. Like one of the guy that got me World Finals. I wasn't originally meant to be going to World Finals, and he really pushed in my corner and said, "Hey, he does really good work and he's been doing really good numbers and all this stuff." So,
I love the guy, man.
Absolutely wonderful. And he's not the only one. And I think there's a misconception out there, and I've seen a lot of people that like
Mr. Aatrox.
Mr. Aatrox, who, I tweeted him very aptly. I think what I described it as, he makes the bile in my stomach churn like a witch's cauldron. But these people you'll always have ignorant people. I can't remember who said it. Maybe Mark Twain said that think about how stupid the average person is and then realize that half of people are even more stupid than that. Yeah. And that guy truly represents kind of the lower end of the echelon, so to speak. But with him and a lot of other people that I'm seeing making takes like this, is this weird assumption that some of the people are surplus to demands that have been gotten rid of. That they are in some ways like, oh, we got rid of like the 5th QA analyst, or like we got rid of the 3rd person who's like the visual design assistant. I'll give you some of the I'll give you some of the job titles that have been got rid of. The product manager for the ERLs, the content lead for the LEC, one of the main leads for EMEA PR communications, XYZ, I can't remember Jan's exact title. These are crucial in terms of creative vibrance and passion. very crucial roles. These are not people that were surplus demands. This is not some weird Elon Musk thing where he's like, oh, everyone was sitting around on beanbags. These are very crucial parts of a product. And I think anyone that can kind of facetiously attach a bad faith interpretation like that needs to take a long, hard look at themselves and realize that you are not attached to this product. You're not part of this atmosphere whatsoever. So you should not make such parasocial analysis on Twitter. And I don't mean that in the buzzword way, because it actually really upsets me to see people talk about people that I know are so important to what we do.
Yeah.
So went a little around there, but
no, I think it's like I try to always practice empathy. I think Niall just a dude who just tweets some reactionary shit, for some likes. I think for a lot of people, Twitter is just like a game, and I think it's like to apply yourself fully, to contextualize what you know and what you don't understand and what you could maybe possibly understand if you think it through, right? I think that requires a lot of effort, which is something that people are not willing to apply to every situation. So you get shit takes like that, right? Like Jan for sure was like he was always super classy, super fucking professional. It's like I've had so many interactions with him, and he was like the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's like the energy they bring, and once again we circle back to the idea of passion for what they're doing. Whenever that shines through in the effort that you put in, I find deep appreciation for people. And Jan, it's so weird because even yesterday, right, he brought me to. He's like, "Oh, Yamato, you have an interview. I'm ready to bring you when you would like to." And we always make sure that everything's okay. If there was any questions, there was like of the zoinkies, if like something was messed up with the interview or anything, he's always like took care of us. So I have deep appreciation for him and many others. And I think the aftershock of this will be that the people that remain will get more responsibilities for the same or less pay, and it can have profound effects deeper than what the surface level would say, right? It's like you mentioned all of these very important roles, and now people that are still there are going to have to pick up after them, right? Because a lot of these things are essential. They are really, really essential.
Yeah, there's a weird kind of there's a weird facet of capitalism, public facing, that is sort of the idea that creativity is not a moneymaker. Because often when stuff like this happens, it's often content and anything relating to visual or audio or something that's like tertiary to a product that are the first to go.
Yeah.
Which is always very confusing to me, because I think that is the lifeblood of why people want to watch. And I think, ironically, if we circle back to what we're talking about in regards to KC, that is what has made you guys so successful, I think, as an organization, that you guys are able to... Because what I see as being a major epidemic in terms of organizations in esports is there aren't many people that are selling feelings. They're trying to sell words or ideas, or there are not many people that are trying to sell a feeling. For me, I think you're seeing this weird kind of wave of power. Power has changed from, I think it's very much aided by VC money back in the background, obviously, like a lot of orgs still. But the rise of like the individual influencer has kind of changed the model of the successful org into more of like a... People will shy away from this metaphor, but hear me out, let me land. It's more like a religion in some ways, in the sense that you have like a head of state. You have a kind of a scripture that is so to follow in the rules and doctrines of what it means to be a fan of that thing, which is, I much prefer this as a model, because I think it gives people something to believe in. I think that is something that has sorely been missed in League of Legends and other esports, is something for people to actually believe in, because I think moments of belief are so tangentially sort of vacuous that it only comes around. 2019 G2, I think, was truly a moment of belief, and I think that's where a lot of faith and passion in the region. 2018 Fnatic as well. Like, I think these are moments of major belief, but I think belief is such a waning thing that why should belief only be achievable when winning is happening? That should be something that is, you should be able to believe in something in any occasion.
I think it just comes down to basically how, let's say, human your connection is with something, right? I think in traditional sports, it's like someone has, a parent that brings them to the game, when they're young, and that sticks with them, and it's a part of the culture. It's like it's a part of your upbringing. It's a part of, your way of life. And I think in esports, that's of course not existent in the same way. And people
in like 20, 30, 40 years,
it's like people attach themselves to players, right?
Of course,
they attach themselves to players because they are the outgoing party that streams and interacts on a human level, right? And I think the content creators right now, Kamito, right? It's like his connectivity to his community is so genuine because he does things that are very, let's say, relatable, right? It's like people watch streamers, even though it's like the production is very different from some soulless show that is running on the BBC or whatever the fuck, and it's like everything is so, let's say, artificial in a way. And I think it's like it's not a question of production value, right? It's just a question of how relatable is something on a human level, because it comes down to, can your passion shine through the screen, and can it come through, and can people relate to it? Because people gravitate towards that. And I think the content creators that have managed to accrue these sizes of audiences is because they're very magnetic, and people, you always have that occasional messages like, you changed my life. I always, at the end of the night, I go through my shit day, and then I listen and I watch your streams. It's like when you read that message, it's like, holy fuck. It's like I'm here with my screen, and somehow I've managed to make a human connection, in a way.
Yeah, you're throwing rocks into the pond when the pond is 100 miles away.
And I think just content creators for sure. I think that's the way to, get that buy-in to the story, because that human connection is already there,
I think human connection is really lacking, and I think just in regards to, I think it is also a response to, I think, major media, a lot of mainstream media, I think, has failed esports as an industry. I think back to like one of the documentary I watched about Gilius, for example, and the Schalke stuff. Whenever they do the major media stuff with that, it's interesting, and they're getting into the kind of human nature of the sport. And whenever you watch, like I've watched, like BBC did a thing where they, I remember, someone will talk about it in the comments, but it's like they go to a gaming house or something. I can't remember whose it was. Maybe it was H2K's, because it was a UK org. It was BBC. I'm not sure, but it's interesting whenever you have these. And I remember one time I was working in a esports cafe in London. Not working, but I was like there for the day. And I remember the BBC came in to interview people. And I know these kind of guys because my dad does a lot of freelance work. My dad's actually, first time I've ever talked about this on the channel, my dad edits documentaries, panoramas.
Okay.
He's done a lot of stuff for Channel 4 and BBC.
Oh, sick. Okay.
Dad's won a BAFTA, actually. Shout out to Gary. He's also won an Emmy. Big man on campus, that guy. Hold tight, you, Gary. Told him he needs to start editing some of my stuff, but it's a bit too lower in his pay grade, I think. But I know what those kind of people are like, and like being around them, and like when I talk about like what I do, they're like, "Oh, esports, you make any money from that?" Like, you know what I mean? I tell them no, but yeah, it doesn't help. But like when you see these people and they interact, and it's sort of like tradition. This is the analogy I'll use. Traditional media people look at esports like David Attenborough looks at wildlife. It's the same thing. Whenever they try and make something about esports, it's quite similar to when David Attenborough makes something about nature, in the sense that they view it with such gawking presence, like, oh, what's he doing? He plays for 16 hours and you're looking at the screen? They look at a teenager looking at a screen like an ostrich, like it's just craning its neck. Like, that's what they view it as. It's like it's an obscenity in a natural environment for them. It's almost Mary Shelley talks about this in Frankenstein. People always misunderstand the beauty of Frankenstein as a book. She talks about how the whole point of Frankenstein is it's called, I think the alternative title for Frankenstein is Promethean Consequence. If you're familiar with the myth of Prometheus, the whole idea is he steals from the gods, and the whole point of Frankenstein is like, you've desanctified the essence of life, and you've created life, you've galvanized it. Mm-hmm. And it talks about at some point during it the assault on nature. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about when you talk about how they view it. They sort of view it as especially in some of the discourse in regards to like, oh, esports people are athletes. That's not even a conversation I'm necessarily interested in having. I don't give a fuck if people who play video games are athletes, but it's interesting when you hear people have conversations like that. You will talk to them about it, and you'll be like, "Well, I don't really care if we're athletes or not, but do you think they're athletes?" Like they're so obsessed with that conversation, and I think that's indicative of a wider discourse around the space. My general point, though, because I've gone on quite a large rant there, is that I think, in general, traditional media and a lot of like the media that has spawned from traditional moved over into esports has failed to create something that is genuine, authentic, and attached to feelings.
I guess the main question then is like, what kind of purpose can traditional media even serve esports?
Sorry, repeat again.
What purpose can traditional media even serve esports? Right. I think the only thing that could come out of it was like the VC money. Right. It's like the VC money came from that part of the world, but I feel like we're moving in a direction where I think in order for esports to succeed and thrive, you cannot rely on, legacy media, in essence. Yeah. I understand that from an outside perspective, it's like I've had to like explain what I do many times. It's like my father still thinks I'm a sports commentator, and that's what he tells our
that's what I used to do when I cast. I told him, it's like, think about match of the day. That was like, imagine I'm like Peter Drury, but for video games.
Pretty much. Right? It's just the easy way of explaining it, and at least in my mind, it's like legacy media. It's fucking dying in it, no?
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to me to see. I'll say this. I've said this to them. So, for example, like when you see something like Sheep Esports come out, LEC Wulu and I can't pronounce the Spanish guy's name. Apologies. You see all of them coming together in this kind of conglomerate, and they've got like backing and whatnot. It's weird to me that they then immediately, one of the first things they did is they went back to the whole legacy media style of like publishing articles. It was like, no. The whole reason you got there here, guys, is you went for the whole you went full BuzzFeed on it. Like you turned journalism kind of in a bad way. Like they kind of like bastardized it and turned it into flashy little TikTok content when it's actually people's careers. Yeah, but I digress. The point is, you so successfully have bastardized and kind of metamorphized, I think would be the more polite way of saying it. Why is it then when we arrive at the apex of the mountain that we go back to the kind of the old form and we start publishing articles and stuff like this, when we so clearly have explored that this is not something that people want to see? It's interesting.
Agreed, yeah. It's weird. It's like I get really excited. Like esports excited me all along because it felt like we could be pioneers in something, right? We could be at the forefront of establishing something that is new and contribute in.
There is a worship of the old though that is so weird.
It is kind of weird. It's just I guess it's in essence. Honestly, I don't get it. I'm trying to understand why, but I really don't get it. It's like I'm in esports, and it's like now, like with Casey as well. It's like I want to create a legacy and contribute somehow in shaping League of Legends, but not turning it into something. I want to discover the best potential version of what this is in its own right, because that's the only way for something to be truly great. It's like no one has become the best or like memorable in any way by copying someone else. It's like sure, you take inspiration from places, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, it's the thing. I've used this. I'm sure I've spoken about this in interviews, but there's two things in regards to this as a creative personally. One of the things that really shifted there are three major things that shifted my perspective in terms of creativity. The first was I read a book called Freakonomics one time when I was 13. Okay. I read it randomly. It's a book by Stephen J. Levitt and something else, Dubner. And it's a really interesting book in the sense of I would maybe recommend it, but it's not like the actual lesson of the book isn't something that like really changed my life, but it was like the book is basically, it explores like very interesting and weird, freaky economic questions, similar to like traditionally with economic questions they might pose thought experiments like wage gap or like how a market economy works and whatever. But the way that it did this is like, what are the similarities between an economic model in terms of crack dealers in this neighborhood here in like Detroit and Wall Street? And it explored the differences in some of the skill sets that someone that like is a drug dealer might have to someone that works on Wall Street. And they did this experiment where they called one of the through nominative determinism, they called one kid winner and one kid was called loser, and they tracked what happened in their life. And they also talked about probability odds in match fixing and sumo wrestling. And I was reading it and I was like, I don't fucking like economics. I've never really massively enjoyed maths either. And I was reading it and I was like, wow, I'm picking up the subject matter and exploring a lot of concepts here via something that has been amalgamized and metamorphized into something else. And it's like, it brought me back to that very important moment when you're a kid and you don't want to have the medicine and your mum sort of comes with the spoon. She goes, there's an airplane. And I realized that by virtue of that, by virtue of it taking on another experience and being transformed into something, that I had consumed something that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I realized then that in terms of creativity and what you take in, you have to draw from so many different sources.
Yes.
It's about recontextualization. I don't know if you have any comments on that, because I can imagine that I'll get into the other experience I've had because that's the one of three, but I can imagine that you've had quite a few experiences where you've had to recontextualize external ideas, especially for someone that is so keen in terms of philosophy and a lot of other ideas.
No, definitely. Like I think taking inspiration from places is essential, but I think where you need to be careful is where imitation goes too far, right? I think that's where you need to be very careful. It's like when I started when I got the coaching gig in 2015, the natural thing for me to do, it's like I was recommended by Mithi, Nuktak, Mr. Alice. They were like, you should coach. You always win the teams that we worked with together. You always like a very, very strong character that was headstrong and could push people when necessary. They're like, you should do this, because they just announced that it would be a paid position to coach. And at the time, I was like, yeah, I just want to move out and be in a gaming house, and I don't want to cast the LEC and LCS in Swedish anymore. It was driving me insane. So I'm gonna jump on that and do it. And for me, I was just looking into all of the greatest coaches, like whether it's Phil Jackson and Ancelotti and Mourinho.
That's the first thing people do.
I didn't necessarily like model what I do after them, but there were ideas that I really enjoyed and I meditated on, right? And now I am still my own version of myself, but along the way, I have definitely taken inspiration from places, because in the end, it's like there's been very, very many wise people that have lived on this earth, that have had experiences that
100%.
can transform the perspective of many people. And I think that it's important to, as you said yourself, to interact with that in some way,
It brings me on to the second, I think, creative influence that really shaped me as a young person is, weirdly enough, I think they're actually really good. I would recommend a few of them. What are they? The masterclass things.
The masterclass.
So there's a masterclass that Martin Scorsese did.
Okay.
And, that I torrented, actually, sorry. Shout out to Pirate.
It's fucking expensive, huh?
Yeah, it's fucking expensive.
They have some good ass people there.
I wanted a few of them as well, so I was like, there's no way I'm fucking paying for all of these. But I watched Martin Scorsese's masterclass, and one of the things he talks about towards the beginning is he sort of outlines Taxi Driver, which is one of my favorite films. There's an opening sequence where he's in the taxi, and there's about 10 shots in a row, about a minute 30 sequence. And he goes through every individual shot, and he's like, sort of as he's going along, he's like, I got this from this Italian film from the 1960s. Like, this film is like a really German absurdist comedy that I watched, and then this thing and this thing. And you realize as you're watching it, you never would have imagined it as you were watching it, but everything that you're seeing is sort of a pastiche and almost like a tapestry made from 10 different sheets.
Yeah.
And it's created an entirely new thing, but the stitching is so seamless. And the metaphor that I always use is I think the best creatives And this goes for fashion designers as well, because I think Alexander McQueen is a really good example of this. That guy could make a garment out of, he would run tires over dresses and he would run it down the runway and everyone would be like, oh my God, how much can I buy that for? It's a really famous story. I remember watching a documentary about him. He literally did that. He ran a tire over a dress. And I think there was a designer that was like calling him up, and he was poor at this point. He hadn't like made any money. And he remember he did that show or something and he got calls afterwards. It's like, I'd like to buy that dress for like 5,000. It was like, he's just made that from like a bin bags and shit like this. But my point is, I think the people that are the pioneers of creativity, as you're saying, in terms of like getting close to imitation, they are the people that can take organs from different bodies, stitch it into an entirely new corpse, and the stitches are not there. You can't see them. It's so seamless. There's no moment that takes you out of that experience. You're like, well, hang on, that's kind of that. It's an entirely new thing. It's been recontextualized entirely. I think that takes supreme talent. You don't meet many people that are minded in that way in this industry, I don't think. And I think once more people like that start emerging, and one of the reasons they haven't is because I think there is an eternal protection of the status quo. I think once that starts to fade and some of that true creativity comes through, that is when esports can start to move in a direction of like truly new things being made.
It's kind of like it's like connecting dots, but doing it in a way and a pattern that hasn't been done before, but still playing around with the same dots.
The pieces are already out there. I mean, like, there's a theory in English literature that every story comes down, if you boil it down to its key elements, there are only 7 stories. When you think about it like that, every story, if you were to boil it down, I think comes down to, is it 7 or 13? Someone will have to correct me in the comments. 7 or 13 or so, like a very small number of archetypes and stories. Everything comes from something. You know, it's we have the same pieces available to us in anything, really. It is like you say, it's how do you reconfigure the dots? There are so many combinations whenever you stack variables against each other.
Yeah. Because even looking at yourself, right? It's like Nardwar is the guy.
Yeah.
Like the people would, if there's a point of comparison, right? It's
For
like
sure.
You do things very well researched, but you've added your own flair to it, and it's still very much your own, even though you can see, like, let's say, patterns, right?
Well, it's like you were saying in regards to the getting too close to imitation thing. When I was analyzing my own craft, it actually kind of annoyed me at the beginning that people were comparing me to Nardwar in that way, because it's immense flattery, because I have an immense respect for him. But it's like, I am trying to carve out something that's individual to me. And a lot of my motivation, I think it got too close to imitation. A lot of my motivation in regards to that was, I realized it's 10 minutes that Riot gives you. No one knows who I am. These players that you come and speak to. And I realized that for him, he represents the perfect modal authority in regards to, he interviews rappers and people that in other ways do not want to be there, which I think is the biggest thing in media for pro players. They do not want to have interviews. It's a massive chore for them. So I realized he has this approach that means that when they are being interviewed, they had this massive moment where it's like, wow, what the fuck? That's the moment I was looking for in regards to that information. And I kind of adapted my style and changed it accordingly to that, because there's a lot of other people that I'm very influenced by. Christopher Morris is a good guy who made 4 Lions and also did a load of other shows. Wonderful satirist. Stuart Lee, like a lot of these other like great comedians that I like, even like David Lynch and people like this. I like the surreal elements. There's a lot more of me that comes out as I continue. But it's like you're saying, it's like, how do you navigate getting close to imitation? Because I know, to link it back to you were talking about how in the initial points you have a lot of coaches that you're kind of taking inspiration from: Ancelotti, Mourinho, Phil Jackson. Could you talk a little bit more about some of those influences, like in regards to the Yamato you see today? Obviously, has so many different people that have probably influenced him.
It's like my brother comes to mind because which also comes from my father. It's pretty much, my father would never go home unless the work is done. And I would often, after school, go to work with my father, and we would work sometimes without eating. We stay until we're finished. You know?
What did he do, if you don't mind me asking?
So my father right now, he owns like a car mechanic shop, and this is what keeps him busy. But he he works until he's finished, and there is no time limit. There's nothing. It's like you work till you're finished, and you apply yourself fully along the way. You know, and my brother's exactly the same way, because my brother he is now a dentist. He's like a control chief at his company and he oversees like I don't know, like 50 dentists in terms of what work they do. And at his age, that is like something that is very unheard of, because usually it's like the experience that you gain over time. It's like usually it's like other people in this field, they have 20, 30, 40 years of experience, but he's very, very early. But he showed an immense level of consistency in his effort, because everything that he did, he applied himself regardless of the circumstance of the day. And when he was going through dentist school, he had like a herniated disc, and basically it's like I've seen my brother take pain. Like he goes to he has a black belt in karate, so like I know that pain is nothing for him. Like it's really, really whatever, right? But this even brought him like to the point where he like had to be bedridden, you know, between the studying and like the gymming that he likes doing. And it's like he got the herniated disc because he just went way too hard in the gym, you know, with squats and doing really, really heavy weights and so forth. And that of course can cause injury. But him going through like dentist school and enduring the herniated disc, and it's like the risk of surgery, I remember at the time was like he could maybe not walk again. So there was like surgery was out of the question. And basically the herniated disc is pressing hard on nerves. So he has like this excruciating, like this pain into the legs, really, really fucks you up, and into the neck. And he went through dentist school, and also he kept going to the gym while he was enduring this. And most of the time he was just like rehabilitating himself, because he wouldn't fucking let anything stop him from moving forward. He's a fucking badass. And now he's managing it a lot better. And while doing this as I mentioned, his role at the company that he works at, while he's doing this, he's competing in fucking bodybuilding. Yeah. And bodybuilding is such an unrewarding sport, because you're just challenging yourself and spending a shit ton of money to put yourself through like hell. It's like when I visited the last time, he was preparing to compete in the Swedish championship, which he won. He woke up at 5 a.m, and then he just bikes in the room where I slept. He just bikes for 2 hours, walks to work, does his work, comes home, picks me up, goes to the gym, and then he goes to sleep. And during that time, all he did was eat fucking boring ass fish. It's like I would order like burgers and shit. And he was like, "Can I smell it?" He just wanted to smell it, you know. It's like, let me smell your chicken nuggets. And then he would eat into his fucking boring ass fish, where every like the salt packets and everything, everything was measured out, you know. You can't use any herbs and spices, you know. There's no fucking. It's fucked up, man. And he's just a machine, you know. It's like absolute machine. He was a Swedish championship, and he was competing at the World Championship as well. Not Mr. Olympia, but like a World Championship that I believe if he won, he would have gotten like a IFB Pro card. But even then, it's like you go through months and months and months of fucked up work to just go on stage for 1 minute. And if you just, even if you eat something slightly wrong as you go in to show what you've built this entire time, it can fuck up it can fuck up everything. It's like your body becomes such a science project. Yeah. And he does that during his dentistry. So he doesn't believe like in excuses at all. Yeah. You know? So 2 very big inspirations for me. Yeah.
That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, Sami Mevdi is a gangster, man. He's a gangster. Sami Mevdi, my brother. Yeah. He watches all my games too, you know.
Bad motherfucker, bro.
100%. He's cold.
Yeah, coldest.
Yes. Love him.
My brother's not that cold, but he's pretty cold himself.
What does he do?
He's he's only 20.
Okay.
He's been working in a bar for the last 2 years, and he's like worked his way up to be a shift manager. And I think his dream long term is he wants to own his own restaurant and bar.
Okay. Well, that's sick.
Which is really cool. He's a good kid. He's a lot more. I'm older than him, and I sort of look at him. I mean, he's married. He got married last year.
Oh, damn!
Which is really cool. He's only 20. He's been with his girl for a few years, and they got married.
Shout out
and
to
I
the
was
homie.
sort of shout out to Garth.
Garth.
Weird name.
Garth.
Should be called Gareth, but they missed out the E.
Garth is very close to girth.
Yeah, which he got called a little bit. They called him. We called him quite a few things. He had a few nicknames. Garth Vader. That's one. Which is good. That's a scary one. Oh, Lady Gargarth. That was another one.
That's cool.
He's a good kid. It's really interesting interacting with him because I think he plays League as well. And like we didn't talk for a little while when I was in Korea. Like I was staying at LS's house and he called me. I was like, I was like at LS's house. He's like, what? You're at LS's house? It's crazy. I was watching a video with him the other day. It was like, it's cool to be able to give him that, but he's a good kid. He's a big inspiration for me.
That's cool. It seems like he has found his like path. Right?
For sure. And I think for me, it's good now. I think when I was 22, 21, maybe a couple of years ago, I had a little bit of scorn because I was like, he's so much more practically sound than me in the sense that he's got his life together in his own apartment. And I was sort of still in my mind where I was like, what am I doing? I was like, I've got a lot more respect for him now. I'm a bit more grounded and kind of I respect because we both had a lot of issues growing up. Like me and him, a lot of turmoil, put our personal ways. And where I'm someone that like kind of internalized that with a lot of like self-resentment and external resentment and kind of just stayed in the same spot, he just kind of got on with it and was like, well, I'm not going to let this impact my life. And I always was like, I didn't understand that, but I think now I have a real respect for that. And I think it's really, really important. He's a big inspiration for me, my little brother. I love that guy. I need to interview him at some point.
No, you should. Shout out to Garth.
Shout out to Garth. Shout out to Girth. Don't want to think about his Garth, to be fair. It's a little bit weird.
That's all you, man. I thought you didn't have visual imageries, you told me.
Yeah, I am actually completely aphantic. I think
Is that a word?
Well, the medical condition is aphantasia. It's like when you don't see any images in your head. But yeah, it's weird that my brain does work weirdly. I don't have any visual images, and I don't have an internal dialogue at all. So my head is like completely blank.
So if you close your eyes and I say girth,
I hear you say girth. Yeah. I know what girth is, you know. Of course I know what girth is. Yeah. Circling back to something that is actually in the...
the third. What's the third?
What? Oh, the third thing? Yeah, good. Really good. Fucking, I forgot about that. The third experience that shaped me creatively is... it's a little bit cliche, but I watched... what's the name? Grand Budapest Hotel by... why can't I remember the director's name? This is really bad.
Wes
Anderson, yeah. Grand Budapest Hotel by Wes Anderson. There's a really good quote at the beginning of the film where he basically says...
Fuck bitches get money.
Fuck bitches get money. And that just changed my life. I realised I had to stack my money. I mean, my money is now my money's longer than Casey's loss streak at this point.
Shit. Give me the quote. I've forgotten the quote.
The quote is basically I can't remember it directly, but essentially what it boils down to is it really taught me that there is a misconception that like everyone thinks that creativity comes from like everyone like dreams up these things and they're like, wow, I'm just not creative enough. I can't have these great ideas. But it basically talks about how the best ideas come from people that are there and they're present and they're waiting to listen. And I realized that I had always taught myself, oh my God, like I'm never going to write a book like so-and-so. I'm never going to make a film like this because, you know, I just can't, I don't have that in me. The creativity is not there. But you realize that is just an excuse that we tell ourselves. Sometimes we come up with these excuses that mean that we can't be that because we're scared of being that. I think that message really grounded me in the sense of, one, it allows you to be present and it connected to the whole thing I learned about the Freakonomics book, which is that to be interdisciplinary, to be open, to learn and access everything. And I think with that message in tandem, it made me realize that like, why am I so hyper-focused on what I'm researching now? I should be like learning about everything. Like not to, you know, spread yourself thin because I don't think you can learn everything, but it made me like...
Chase curiosity
and be present for what you could learn because I think that is the true importance of that message is just to be present. There's so much that you... And nowadays the irony is there are so many fucking ideas I've had for like little films or scenes or dialogue that are written on my notes app and it comes from me Instead of like being on a train and wearing my headphones, taking them off, listening to conversations. If something I hear, like I catch a word and it's really interesting, or like, just like the random drunk people that you'll see, what they actually have to say, because they quite often have this weird sagic wisdom that can be distilled sometimes.
No, I'm with you fully, because I think the main thing that has kept me in esports for so long is being very accepting of the idea that everything I know today might be wrong tomorrow if I allow myself to keep an open mind, right? Because in something that is ever evolving, I think you need to be able to pay attention to the things that do, because I think sometimes it's very easy to get married to ideas and make them a part of who you are. But I like to think that anyone I interact with is like, every time a fan says, "Yo, I'm a fan of you," like every time it's weird to me, because in my mind I try to always make that experience valuable for them, because in essence it's like I couldn't see myself. It's like, for example, I was randomly invited to a Louis Vuitton like fashion show, and I was so fucking out of place there. It's like everyone's bougie as fuck, and everyone had their chin.
You actually asked me to come, and I said I was busy.
It's like it was strange, because I didn't feel like I belonged there at all, right?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing like Justin Timberlake and Jessica Biel. They were sitting right in front of me.
Oh my god! What year was this?
Fuck! What the hell? I think this was 2019.
Yeah.
And that experience was very like bizarre in many ways. I felt like I just was beamed up into a UFO spaceship, and it was very strange. But it's like when I saw Justin Timberlake and Jessica Biel, that was like the first time I was like, holy fuck, these people are right there,
Yeah.
And it's like when I run into a fan at the studio and they have that reaction, like, wow, Yamato, can we take a picture? I'm like, for me, I never get used to it, because in my mind, I like to think that any interaction is a possibility to learn something new, And I like to, it's like when I begin a season, the thing that excites me the most is what will I learn from these players and from the people that I work with. And I think that keeps me intrigued and it keeps me curious. I think holding on to that is so important. And to add a final point, I think there's so many attention vices. It's actually definitely something that is difficult to deal with in esports too, because of like the generation of players that are playing. It's like you have phones, you have like Twitter, you have things to always keep you busy. It's like everyone takes their phone with them when they go to take a shit, right? And you play mobile games, and there's always something to do. It's like your mind is always very, very busy. But I think
people don't talk about this either, but like the presence of being in like a metropolitan city, like
that too. Yeah.
Your brain is not like naturally like biologically wired to like, be around like neon lights and all of these synthetic lighting all the time.
It's
and
like
cars as well. Your brain is on constant alert.
You don't get a chance. It's like you need to take the chance to allow your mind to explore your own thoughts. Because I think a lot of people have made the habit of running away from them. And I think that's where creativity lies. It's like, if you allow yourself to do, let's say you absolutely do nothing for 30 minutes, which is already a big ask. I think a lot of people, 5 minutes, to sit down and do nothing. Just see what your mind does with your perception and what you perceive in that moment, just doing nothing. No phone, you just sit in a chair and you see what happens. I think that can be such a healthy exercise to become more in tune with the potential of a situation through the power of your own mind, which sounds very silly, like I'm some fucking guru, but I think that people should allow themselves to do nothing. It should be like a ritual of some sort. Because in the past, I liked listening to Joe Rogan. Now he's fallen off a cliff ever since the Spotify thing and the Texas thing. It's like when he talked about apes and doing bear sound, when he was doing this shit,
he's really good at making animal noises. His impression of Yoel Romero is really good as well. They turned him to a machine.
It's like it used to be interesting, but he kept referencing this book called The War of Art.
Yeah.
Where it's like you need to allow yourself, you need to sit, like if you're writing and you need creativity to come to you, you need to be there and ready for when it arrives. So you need to allow yourself to sit in front of a blank page and not have any stimuli from other places in that moment, because your mind will entertain itself. So it's like you wait for the muse to come to you, because it won't come at the planned time. So you need to invest time being there, present with your own thoughts, in essence.
I mean, I vastly agree with that. I think that's really important. It's something that David Lynch talks about. He's a great director, and he talks about the importance of transcendental meditation for himself, which is not something I personally tried. But he talks about creativity for him is about fishing in your own brain. You sort of, every time you go in there and you're sort of able to be vacant in your own brain and kind of do nothing, like you're saying, you're able to kind of pull these ideas out. And the more time you spend fishing, because obviously you go out there with a hook and you've got to wait a while. You want to catch a big fish, you've got to wait a while. And you can get some pretty big fish by doing stuff like that, I think.
For sure, yeah, for sure. It's so hard though. It's like everything is so interesting.
Yeah,
everything's insanely interesting. It's like everyone is trying to grab your attention, you know? Clickbait, you know, thumbnails. It's like, I fall for that shit too, you know? I fucking open up my Twitter account and scroll, and it's like,
yeah, I saw you watch that. I saw you watch that Nemesis, Fnatic ruined Nemesis's career video on stream. You fell for the trap as well.
I didn't. I watched it on Dom's stream.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It's the second hand. I got annoyed when he went into the game. You're playing League of Legends while I'm watching.
Get back to the video, man. Shout out to that guy.
Nemesis or Hazmat?
Hazmat. Guy very clearly inspired by me.
Now that's connecting the same dots, I felt like. You know? I think that was... Because you get some like Patrick CC vibes there. He stole a lot of shit from you too, which is cool. Like people find themselves.
I had a conversation with him about it. I was basically just like, you are making recap content in the form of a video essay, and you need to align on both of those things. Because I said something to him. I said to him, you know, you have an immense responsibility with your platform. You are like essentially a journalist. And he was like, no, I'm a random. I was like, your video just got 200,000 views, bro. You're like influencing. It's like you surely realize that you're like influencing like a major idea here. Like you're putting Fnatic ruin Nemesis's career. I mean, if Richard Lewis publishes that article tomorrow, you better fucking bet your fucking butt off he's not just fucking put my interview clips in.
Yeah.
Because who the fuck am I? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's funny, like the conversation of like journalistic integrity. It's such a blurred line now, but it's the same thing with
a lot of the biggest journalists in our space.
Like Sheep Esports, right? It's like, like how many times was there like an apology and I'm gonna do better? Like how many times you gonna say that? You know, it's like at some point, you know, it's like, what's up, man? It's like, what are we doing here? You know, there needs to be a principled approach.
Well, I think
certain things.
The problem is with a lot of these kids. Well, it sounds really patronizing.
The Pokemons, you mean?
I'm quite often only a year or so older than them, but when I speak to them, it sounds really patronizing. But you know, when I speak to them quite often, you sort of
refluff my bag. You could just
no worries, do your thing. But when I speak to them quite often, I get the impression, just in terms of where their career has gone, that often. Oh fuck no.
Oh, good.
A little bit of moisture on the carpet is what we need. I get the fucking hell. You've really offset the levels here. Is he still in shot? Wonderful stuff. You get the impression from them sometimes. I mean, like the problem is often they will arrive at like an upcomer or like a deserter or something like this, and they'll meet their first guy who's really got like some pedigree in journalism, and then they'll start to learn. They're like, listen, it's like Jonah J. Jameson. They're like, hey, listen, kid, you know, you want to publish some Rasta rumors about Spider-Man, you got to be careful, you know? But before that, like, they really went to, like, the school of TikTok, you know? Like, they've really not learned how to do anything. It's like the Wild West out there.
No, for sure. It's like Jacob Wolf, right? It's like he did everything, does things the right way, right? In terms of him like, let's say, breaking news, because he wouldn't run 99.9% things. It would be like 100%. His track record was.
I think that was the thing, and like I've spoken to Wulu. Like I don't think he's a bad guy. I do think he's made some fuck ups, and I think he would be completely transparent about that. But like there was the thing that struck out to me from the Thorin video that he made about him, which was like quite funny to me, is the reply that Wulu made to Jacob Wolf, where he was like, Jacob Wolf was like, "What kind of content would you like to see to me?" And Elise Wulu was like, "Could you like explain how like you always get it right?" I've paraphrased that wonderfully, but like that was such a beautiful thing to me because it's like I don't know how to explain. Like it's so hard for me to explain like what is so wonderful about that, because it's like it's almost like a repackaged version of like teach me how to do my job, kind of, in a way, where I feel bad almost for some of these journalists who come up that kind of way, because you're almost like your value system and metric is so like appeased by metrics. And I know for me personally, that's something that I'm a complete slave to as well. I'm the first guy. I mean, I'll have a mental breakdown if I've worked really hard on something and it gets like 2K views on fucking YouTube. I feel like I want to fucking jump off a building. Like I'm very emotional in that way. But like it's and with YouTube views sometimes like some of my best interviews on YouTube have like 4,000 views, and I now don't think they're my best interviews. I think that the ones that have the most views, it becomes completely recontextualized by success sometimes. So I can imagine for them, and I think part of that is like being brainwashed by TikTok and all these different things that are so algorithm and metric based. I think when you grow up in this environment, not grow up, but like when you develop your career in this environment that is so like based, and you see what gets you likes, and that's what you become avaricious towards. Truth is really something that is secondary to that. Not to suggest that people are lying, but I think people are willing to, similar to what you were talking about earlier, like play the game of snake and ladders to kind of get to the top of the board, really.
I think the crucial thing always is like if you are dealing with anything that has any power, right? I think it's so important to do everything in such a principled way, because even though you might have the best intentions, people will try to take advantage of you. And that is like the most important like thing in terms of making sure that when you can have impact on people in terms of what you report, it needs to be so principally clean, because people are going to try to take advantage of you. And then your intention really doesn't matter, because you need to be insanely consistent, right? It's like being a journalist just comes with so many, like, let's say, weights that you need to take care of. But over time, having that history is what actually gives you trust, right?
Yeah. I don't know, so many, it's so insane to me, some of the stuff. Like I still find it very difficult, and I'm not saying this in like a Travis Gaffer kind of way where I like kind of want to pretend to interstitially be a journalist or not be a journalist. But like for me personally, it's hard to categorize what I do. I think the joke I tell on Twitter is that I'm an audiovisual interrogator is the title I've given myself. But I think in terms of the information that I garner and kind of what my role is in terms of what I view it as, which is more so what I'm interested in now is the podcast, because I think I have a skill in traversing that which is maybe knotted verbally and untying it and being able to have good conversations with people and maybe demystifying some of the concerns, which I think is an act of journalism in a sense, in that it takes information that is there and it allots it in some way. So I would probably say that I'm a journalist, but some of the stuff I see is so insane in some ways. Like I think, to talk about that, Travis Gafford, the whole thing with him, the criticism that he gets is the kind of binary state of whether he's a journalist or not. But then he's the one that broke the news about the people leaving LCS, right? I think he talked to whatever his fucking name is, bald guy, American.
Everyone goes through their own life with their own insecurities, right? And
sure,
there's so many sometimes external motivators that might push you in the wrong direction, like you mentioned yourself, right? It's like you feel like some of the videos that you've made that have less views are some of your best, and something else. It's like in that moment, do you want to lean into your own intuition or you're going to lean into the response of the crowd. And I think that it's like being a content creator, you drown in trying to find the value in everything, and it is very easy to take, let's say, the quicker path to sustain ability in the moment rather than building something over time where people appreciate the authentic nature of what you want to bring to the table. I think that's the challenge for everyone, right? It's like how many content creators have risen and then fallen off. Like it's like so many YouTube channels that are even dedicated to just paying attention for this, and people are just waiting.
Yeah. That's interesting. Actually, I hadn't thought about that.
It's definitely a minefield of decisions because it is very fragile, right? Very, very fragile. So I can understand people's like insecurities in that vein, right? But then it's like always the most successful are always the ones that stuck to their ideas. It's like I think of that guy who reviews hamburgers, right? It's like he's the G, man. He was doing his thing. You know, there's a bunch of content creators like that.
It's consistency.
You know, what's that guy who did the whole like the documentary on the plagiarism on YouTube, right? That
guy.
Yeah, that guy seems to just be doing his own thing, you know, and so many content creators that are just like really in their element, you know, and they've really worked hard to build something. But I think along the way as well, there was a lot of people that maybe didn't chase a spark in a way that, you know, maybe a lot of people along the way that just took the wrong decision.
There are a lot of people who are intensely jaded, I feel like, from years of being around. And I can't really blame them. I think this links back to, and I speak from an immense point of privilege, and I'm self-aware enough to know that I've not been around for long enough to kind of speak to a lot of these things. But like I can piece together a tapestry in the same way the historian would. You know, you take the eyewitness report and you kind of, you know, in a similar vein to like a Suetonius, you're digging up the remains of the day to kind of piece together what it was. So I think generally speaking, you can't really blame a lot of these people because we're in a position now. I mean, I'll say this very candidly as a journalist, and in light of Jan leaving yesterday being even more relevant. Like, I'm one of maybe 3 people that go to the press room in Berlin right now, which is quite insane when you consider like the new eyes and you think about Karmine Corp joining the league and Koi in the way they're rejoining in a different light. It's normally me and Lara from SK that are in there, and Lara doesn't even do interviews anymore. She stopped most recently. It's normally me, Lara, and maybe the BDS social manager is in there. Sometimes they have them on site. Yeah, everything else is doing remote. It's all been moved remote, and this is to no fault of anyone. Like the experience has been scaled back. Like to be openly transparent about it as well, they've scaled back journalist days. There's no journalism experience on Saturday and Sunday. It's only on Monday. Teams only do interviews on Monday, which I think is interesting because teams don't have to do interviews on Saturdays and Sundays now. They can still do them on Monday. Okay. Only do them on Monday, which is like you've cut it in 2/3, and then
I thought that was because we lost. But it turns out
it turns out you just weren't getting any.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, which is and what's been given in, there's a little bit of a media day. There's like a 3 to 5 day media day where you can speak to some of the teams in advance of the season, but that's not making up for 2 days a week. I mean, that's a considerable amount of time that's been given up there. And I mean, just also in general, I mean, if you're in Berlin, you'd imagine that like there was 2 days you could be covering an event, and there's not. I think just in general, the experience of doing journalism in the way that I have for the last year from MSI onwards, I think it's all moving to be scaled down, and it makes me kind of sad because I think there aren't many people that are going to be attached to the human emotion of it. Because I think when you write articles and you're interviewing people behind a screen, there's not. It's why I've committed to doing. I mean, I've come to Berlin to do the podcast with people. Like, I don't want to do the sort of interviewing people over the screen because I think there are wonderful conversations you have, and I think with Thorin, for example, with his reflection series, obviously just goes out the window when you consider the great history of his interviews, and a lot of the earlier ones he is in person. But I think just for convenience sake, he can do a lot of them in person. And I think that what he sets out to achieve, it's wonderful for him. And I think what he taps into is such a encyclopedic, almost database like knowledge that can draw upon and then react to, and then also just a very acerbic wit that in the moment is completely transferable and makes comfortable. I feel like in what I explore, I really value being at the scene of it and feeling the atmosphere and just be experiencing, because this is just as much an experience for me, kind of being around this. And one of the concerns for me, especially with these layoffs, is that I feel as if the press experience and just in general, like a lot of the external coverage is, and this links back to what we're saying about the rise of the influence and the content. I think Riot have found their new people to tell stories. And I think a lot of the onus and responsibility is being shifted away from even them internally as a product. When I look at some of these content leads and I look at some of the narrative people and writers I think they have found their new storytellers. And I think there is a malevolence there in the sense that these people are intrinsically motivated to tell stories because it makes them money. And Riot doesn't have to pay for it. There is a danger there for me.
It's like, I think it still comes back to, it's like you can't manufacture passion, right?
Exactly, that's another important thing.
I think this is the power that content creators have, like the successful ones, right? Is that they have created a relationship with an audience that is so immensely powerful. So it transcends whatever they are doing, regardless of game, and it moves, with the person. And I think leveraging that just seems so natural, because I think just human connection is kind of OP, kind of broken.
It's very broken, this patch, I heard. It actually can't be nerfed either. It really can't.
It can't be, yeah. It's also what I enjoy the most, so.
100%. And yeah, I think it's sad because a lot of what is going to be externally reported now in terms of content creators, journalists and whatever, like people that write articles, there is going to be such an innate sedation that comes with it. It's very sedated, it's very manufactured, it's very inorganic. Whereas like for me, my number one goal when I did this, and one of my major things was, one of my biggest influences, Hunter S. Thompson. And I think it's very, dress up cowboy to think that I could ever be someone like that, because this guy was, doing cocaine and going to riots and shit like this, which is not quite what I want to do.
Yeah.
But the thing that's great about him is he pioneered a style of journalism that was like, I want to get to the scene of this and the root of this, and this is about me beautifully and poetically exploring what is going on. It's a journalistic convention through literature. And for me, that's what I kind of wanted to do. I wanted to get to the root of it and talk to people about the human aspects of it. And I worry that that's probably not a primary concern of just me. There's probably other people out there, because this is one of the things one of the first things I said about to you when I arrived today is I can't remember what it was you said, but I remember responding that a lot of esports players are very interesting. And you talked about how you have to be deranged to get into this. And I said, it's not just that you have to be deranged to get into this. You have to become deranged just by doing it, the pure repetition of it. I have met so many players that are genuinely some of the most interesting people. They have so many stories and so much behind them, because there is such a level of, you have to be a little bit fucked up to be really good at this game, I think. And we have a rare thing here. In NA, I can imagine it's a little bit more hard for them, because I think all of these kids that go to LCS are fucking trust fund kids. I mean, that's just generally down to the nature of the socioeconomic makeup of that country. You can't really take a risk on your life, go to LCS. So generally speaking, a lot of the kids who end up going to LCS have been able to do that because they had a fallback option. Whereas in EU, it's kind of like you got a little bit more freedom. So a lot more of the fuck-ups end up being here. Like you got a lot of kids that grew up in really poor families, for example, Eastern European guys. I've spoken to a lot of them. Grew up in families where mum pulls out your mum, the babushka, brings out the belt if you playing ranked ARAMs at 3 a.m. Lightning strikes, and so you don't have internet for 3 weeks. That kind of shit. And a lot of people had fucked up situations with lots of different stuff currently and previously.
Yeah.
And that to me, normal people will always try and find an element of suffering in their life to contextualize something that makes them interesting. Because misery actually is the paintbrush and foundation for a lot of people, I think. People that have gone through adversity will always use that as a way of understanding themselves. I think people that have nothing wrong with them find it so difficult to understand themselves because knowing and being present in your own mind is so hard if it doesn't have a physical manifest. And I think that's why people are so obsessed with, like, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I have bipolar. Because that is telling you, that is painting it, that is placing a candle in the deepest psyche of your mind and telling you what it is.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like I personally, I was very fortunate growing up because it's like I had a roof over my head. And
Yeah.
I had parents that loved me very dearly, but my father was very, very pushing, very, very conservative in the way of thinking. And he thought that, metal music was from the devil, and like PC gaming is from the devil, He would always say, "Eshab al-kabel," which means he's going to pull out the fucking cable. And I had to I had
He
to
was
do
me
some-
thinking that would be like some Quran verse. But it's just pull out the cable.
It's like I had to pull like wizardry to even play League because it's like the idea I had in mind of what League could become was something I imagined already from the get-go. So I had to like do this thing where I was like playing with the hoodie over the screen, and I would like playing. I was playing for the majority of my pro career on the laptop I got from school, and I would have to go to bed at a certain hour, which was way too early because I would like go and I would like, go to school and then sometimes go to work with my father, and I would burn my thighs and play ranked like this, in bed.
Yeah.
And whenever I heard my father's steps, I would like lower the screen and I would play like that, 20 FPS. I would be like top 10 on the ladder, And in my mind, it's like so many sleepless nights, but it was so easy because my vision was so damn clear,
Yeah.
And it's like my first year when I played LCS, I went to school same time and I traveled every weekend, and I had to travel basically like 20 hours because the connection was really, really shit. And it's like at the end of the LCS season, when I played for the first time, I basically had such an extreme burnout where like for 3 weeks, I just couldn't do shit. But I regret nothing of that because in the end, the idea of it's like what my father pushed in me and what he demanded from me, and like that there was this kind of fear that I had when I was at home in everything that I did. Like I was very anxious all the time at home. It kind of pushed me to figure out ways to just get it done no matter what,
Yeah.
And I've also looked for that in players when, for example, the 2018 Vitality roster, right? It's like I knew the players, I knew how they played, we scrimmed against them, I knew the players and the profile. But it really, really made me buy into them. So Jizuke, Attila, Gilius, and Jack Jordan, of course, Kabusha, that was the roster, and then Kiki Slater. But what really, really brought me into like the player that is Jizuke was the sacrifices he had to make to even get his foot through the door, because he was willing to lose absolutely everything to make it. And even if he didn't, he would have absolutely no regrets. And that leap of faith, that level of risk and determination and the character that builds of going through very, very like tough conditions and going through a very, let's say, tough upbringing, it builds character, It really, really builds character.
And what are characters but not people in a story? I mean, it's a story to tell, right? I think that's the most important thing about characters. And I think it links back to what we were talking about when you talk about that as a story is so utterly interesting. But I think a lot of people would only know Jizuke for split pushing on Echo or laughing maniacally, or when he like trolled and softened it a little bit when he played NALCS. But that is intensely interesting.
I just have to say, he was all-pro, #1 mid laner the last LCS split that he played.
Yeah.
He smoked the whole
What I'm
region.
saying is I think a lot of people would associate him with, like, I remember a lot when he was getting made fun of on the Dom stream. It'd be like, because you had pro view and you could like see him laughing in the player cams and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, for sure.
But point being, like, I think there was a lot of players that like have intensely interesting things about them, and it doesn't need to be something that's highly strong as that, where it's like life or death scenarios. Like a lot of them just have got shit going on that you would never know.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's like there's so many things that cross my mind now, but it's just not my story
Your business,
to share.
yeah, for sure.
It's
Well,
like
it's,
it's
you know,
not my story to share.
it's my job. In some ways, though, it's what I've set out to make my job is to talk to these people and kind of demystify and untangle some of the knots, because there is a guardedness, I think, of players, and they don't want to talk about themselves a little bit, but I think it's because they're worried. They see what attaching personal to gameplay does for them on Reddit and Twitter and stuff like this. I think when handled incorrectly, it can be such a dangerous thing for them.
I would say it's more so that I think that a lot of players are just not in tune with what they've experienced even. I think I have come across many players that haven't let their past catch up to them. And I think that's something that comes with age, because
you run towards your goals so much that you don't look at what's behind you, and when you stop, it catches up with you.
It's like your own story, the realization of the impact it has on you is something that happens over time, you know? It's like even things this year for me, it's like things that I went through in my childhood and my view on things that I haven't internalized, but I am acting upon them without knowing. And sometimes there is moments where that soul searching kind of occurs and things, while you're doing certain things, begin to make sense because you're allowing yourself to face those thoughts in a way. And I think this is just a part of growing as a person. And I think in a lot of cases, I think it's very easy for any person to not truly understand what their life experience, what that has as an impact on how you do things and what your worldview is. Because in essence, it's like coming to that realization leaves you with a choice. Otherwise, you are kind of just, let's say, a slave to your past in a way, right?
I think the phrase I always use is indebted to a previous day, I think is what a lot of people, you can be. I feel like often when you view your life, it really comes down to about, it's quite weird to think about it, as I thought about this a few times. I wouldn't be able to remember the specific days, but I think you could probably boil my life down to about 10 very specific days. Moments that shape you. That's what it really comes down to. It's interesting to think that a lot of your kind of, your framework and your decision making can kind of be traced back to very specific, singular, probably a week of your life if you just stack it up. I always thought about that in kind of, like the old film, like the cellophane things you stitch them together. You could make a thing that would be like a week long. It would probably sum up everything that shaped you and made you into someone that is the creature of your comfort.
I haven't thought about it, so I can't apply it in real time to myself. I'll have to explore.
For sure. I wanted to get onto another topic here, and it was a segue. I had the most mental segue, but it won't matter because we can circle back. You mentioned Justin Timberlake there a little bit, and obviously people got a little bit annoyed at us because we did a fundraiser for Palestine, not Crimea River. That was one of the best segues of all time, by the way. Really
What's the question, brother? I can always put him in these minefields. But don't worry, I'll be moonwalking.
Yeah, you're moonwalker.
I'll be moonwalking.
But yeah, obviously we did it's just a general segue. We did a fundraiser towards Palestine, which obviously went pretty well.
Yeah.
haven't celebrated in person towards that. It's really good.
I'm happy that we did it. I think, yes.
I wanted to. My question would be, and obviously you've addressed a concern there in regards to a minefield there. But I mean, my thing is, as a Palestinian man in an industry that is kind of, you know personally I know from anyone that there are a few people that I've reached out to that have been like, hey, I'd rather not attach my name to that, or maybe that's a little bit too technical for me.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for me, in terms of my motivations, I'm not Palestinian anyway, but my motivations are entirely tied towards, I think it's a tragic loss of life, and I would like to use any sort of impact or influence that I have to influence that, because I don't attach a political polemicism to it. But obviously for other people, there is an implicit danger there in regards to their job and whatnot. I wanted to ask you about some of your thoughts in regards to that, because it must be quite difficult to be so outspoken in regards to that, and kind of see some of your compatriots and fellow industry people be so silent in regards to that.
I have an understanding as to why people make the choices that they make. For me, it was an easy choice because I realized in a world where I can't speak up about what is going on in Gaza and the West Bank and Palestine, in a world where I would lose anything that I perceive as valuable by speaking up about what is going on, it is no longer valuable to me. So if I would lose opportunities, it would be opportunities that I wouldn't want to have in the first place.
I think it's a similar mentality for me.
And I imagine for some, it's like some people would argue that, it's like, what impact can I really have? Like, why should I risk? Or I have things to take care of. I have certain, responsibilities that I need to take care of. I think people can find their own rationalization. It's like I try to always look at things through the lens of empathy, because in cases where I can't understand in the moment, I'm not going to judge without knowing for sure.
Yeah.
But a part of me I do wish that people would speak up about it, but I can only, in the end, do my part and have my own personal conviction. And that's it pretty much, It's like the suffering that is ongoing. I think for me, I guess the shock is if anyone, let's say, interacts with that and sees what is ongoing, the starvation, the death and the destruction of all of the buildings, and how openly racist and xenophobic the language is in regards to Palestinian lives, and how everything is framed around the justification as to why this is happening. It's truly astonishing, Yeah. It's like I'm hoping that it comes from a place of that there's no reaction, that it comes from a place of maybe they haven't seen or something like this, but I'm hoping that at least, even if people don't say it out loud, that they do understand that this is just a fucking horrible atrocity that is happening in
real time.
In real time, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing with that in regards to kind of the desensitization of people. I think you see it in like the Iraq era, Bush era, where it's like the language and the
dehumanization.
The language moves from like, today 30 people had their heads blasted by cannon fire from 30 casualties. It's like the language is so unaffected. And it reminds me, it always brings me back to whenever you talk about that, people are always like, but it's just words. It brings me back to, there's an experiment they did. I forget who it was. It's a psychological experiment where they analyzed, they showed a load of people car crash footage. And people will predict a car going faster depending on whether you say, how far did this car crash? How far did this car smash into? Depending on the kind of modifier that you use, it would actually predict that it goes faster.
Language has a profound impact.
Yeah, and I think anyone that doesn't sort of realize that language is really, it's why messaging is so important. And I think
it's like George Carlin bit.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
It used to be shell shock, and now post-traumatic stress disorder.
Similar to what I was talking about. Yeah. One of my questions I would ask you, and I tapped into it similarly in Montpellier when we did our first interview, is I remember going through your Ask FM answers. And there's an answer you gave in like 2015 where it's like someone asks you, you're familiar with like the landscape of what 2015 was like. It was all just a bunch of white teenagers watching savage feminists get wrecked compilations and going into the alt-right rabbit hole that is Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, that kind of thing, and just sort of having this weird
facts
kind
and
of
logic.
Yeah, literally this kind of reactionary. Ironically, because those people exist in Layu and in direct contrast to identity politics, but they formulate this kind of tribal identity politics themselves and act no better than what they actually end up criticizing. But you got asked one of these questions on Ask It Fam. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a question in that ilk. You know, when you read things from these people and you're like, I see what club that you belong to. And the way in which you responded to it, and this is 2015, I mean, I can't remember, it might have been even be earlier, but I mean, you're only, how old are you now? 28, 29, 27?
28.
28. So, I mean, this is a good 9 years ago, and you were about 19 years old. And I think what struck me from reading that was this is someone that is clearly philosophically relatively well principled in regards to what you believe and how you conduct yourself. I wanted to ask you where that came from, because from everything else you told me in terms of school, you kind of had this like lazy kind of Shikamaru from Naruto, lazy genius kind of attitude, being a little bit of the class clown.
I think, like growing up, I was often a victim of generalization. You know, I was a foreigner, and then it's like when we visited, like Jordan, for example, I was a foreigner there too. You know, like I was a fucking foreigner, whatever place I went. You know, it's like esports was my like escape, right? But I think
too brown for the white kids, too white for the brown kids.
Exactly. It's just. I think it's a very common experience, right, for people that like move to a place like Sweden or anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
I think being a victim of that and also seeing how ideas are formed and how certain events or certain things can be misrepresented. I think I've always been careful with like labeling anything, you know, like labeling a person or like I want to see a person for the person that they are, you know. I think this is crucial, you know. It comes back to the conversation of before. It's like the level of curiosity that when you speak to someone, that there is something that they can tell you that you don't know about, right? Because they have gone through their own experience, right? Because like I've always tried to keep this very close to heart, you know. And I don't know exactly where it comes from, but I guess it's in an idea, like in a way, it's like I grew up being an outcast in many circumstances, you know, for reasons that didn't really mean anything, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's interesting to hear you talk about where kind of the principles come from, but I wanted to tap on a little bit. You seem very assured of yourself, and you talked a little bit about philosophy. So I guess I would ask you, we've talked about some of your influences, and you talked about some of the influences in regards to coaching and traditional sports. But when we talk about philosophy, that's more of a framework that can kind of apply a bit more wider. I guess what I'd like to ask you about is a little bit more about that philosophy, what it comes down to, if you were to explain it.
So there was this book called The Four Agreements. There is one particular agreement that I always come back to, because I know when I share this is that this main agreement is always the one that stands out to me the most, and it is, don't take anything personal.
I've heard that one before, I think.
And because nothing really is, right? Nothing really is. It's like we are. It's very natural to in like to view everything through your own perspective, and I think in that you can. I lost my train of thought. Like, if you can think about your own experience, and it's like the time that you went through, and it's so vast. If you appreciate the fact that a person that you speak to also has had a very, very vast experience that has shaped them, and they have their own reasons for doing certain things, I think it becomes so much easier to go through life, because so many things are outside of your control. Like so many things are outside of your control, and the only thing that you can choose is how you interact with the situations that you're put in, right? Because there's elements of luck with success. It's like Casey got into the LEC, and like many times when I look back at my own life, there were moments where if I chose a different path or a different decision in that moment, maybe everything would have been different, right? So I have a deep appreciation for that, and I think that every individual experience is unique in essence, so I just never take anything personal. Yeah. And then I think the second layer of it is I try to do my best in anything that I do, because I think doing your best is something that everyone does, but people put an excuse as to why they didn't do something better. But what you've done is a measurement of your best, because the monologue that you have in your mind as to why you don't apply yourself is a representation of your best. So whatever input anyone has is at the time their best. And it might sound harsh, but when
it's the best they can offer at that moment,
And in my mind, it's like however I apply myself in the moment in terms of how much energy I can spend or whatever I say in the moments, I'm tired, I'm not gonna do it. This is my best. And sooner you get to grasp with that, you can begin to measure yourself accurately. Because I think in that dishonesty, you don't measure yourself accurately, you think more highly of yourself, and you lose potential growth, because what you do is a measurement of your best, and that's what you want to push for. Yeah,
for sure.
So it came back to the whole samurai thing that I mentioned before, right? And then it's just a question of, these two are like the most driving factors, but the third one is something I also mentioned in this conversation is I am okay with the thoughts and ideas that I have today, that they might change.
I was going to
tomorrow.
go back to that. That's actually weirdly interesting. There's a similarity there with LS with you, because he spoke to me about how his philosophy majorly changed. He spoke to a StarCraft pro player, and he learned a lot about how, it doesn't matter what you say, it's the rules of today aren't the rules of tomorrow. There are so many different variables, so it's always more beneficial to have a framework that can encompass ideas and encompass space that can change. Because if you have just ideas, the container is not there. They can kind of wane and fade.
It is not to say that I don't do things with very strong conviction, because I do.
Yeah.
Like I have very, very clear ideas on how I believe League of Legends should be played, and how I like to coach and how I should approach this coming weekend. And I have very, very clear ideas and strong conviction. But I allow those ideas to be challenged by the experience that I invite in conversation with other people and also in thought. Because when you align yourself with an idea too harshly, it becomes personal when it's not working, as an attack
There's
on
too much
yourself, right?
It becomes that kind of the gambler's paradox. There's always the image of the guy mining. He's just before diamonds. Constantly are in pursuit of that. I wanted to link this. I think this is the perfect segue to talk about the current issue of KC right now, in the sense that you guys are 0-6, because I think a lot of that philosophy is very interesting. And I think if we loop back entirely, you talk about the trust, the conviction, and the philosophy that is present at this org. I wanted to talk about some of the issues that are plaguing this organization, and obviously through a lot of the public channels you've expressed discontent with what's going on, and you're able to take personal autonomy in the sense of, the draft might be good here, but I think I wanted to allow you the position and form of the podcast and being able to have me here and talk about it. Maybe if you wanted to express in a way that can't be misinterpreted some of the issues that you're facing right now.
I think certain dynamics require more time to figure themselves out. And I think with the way Winter Split is structured, it is very cruel and punishing to dynamics that need more time. So we had a 1 week boot camp in Paris before the split started. And then we had, let's say, 10 days of practice before we started. And we didn't manage to piece it together well enough to actually beat the other teams, right? Because you are at the victim of your patch read, you are the victim of what the opponents bring to the table and their preparation process, because that's competition, and also how the dynamic actually reacts playing on stage. I believe winter is an opportunity for you to grow and gather as much data as possible to prepare you for future seasons. The result, it might have a mental toll, right, when you're sitting 0-6. But I am ruthlessly pragmatic in terms of what my approach is, because it is very important that we maintain what is good and that we are very disciplined about what we're doing right, and then moving forward and taking the right steps to get better. Because the intention and the goal of this team and the setup that we have and the coaching staff and everything is with the intent, when we play the final game of the season, that we have done everything we can to be the best version of ourselves in that moment, and that it's deep, very deep into the competitive season, meaning summer finals, world championship, and onward. When we zoom out, winter split is not going to mean shit, but what is going to matter is the effort that you put in. So I'm not of the idea that winter split doesn't matter, because this frames everything wrong. It's a question of how you use your time in the winter season, bleeding into the spring season, and then bleeding into the summer season.
So
right?
To kind of surmise what you're saying, in some ways, you're saying that the fruits of your labor might not manifest yet.
Yes. So, for example, last week, so the first week, right, we threw games and we couldn't, we didn't have the correct patterns down in terms of how we progressed the game. It's like a lot of that comes down to how synchronized you are with your teammates. It's not a question of lack of knowledge on an individual basis, but it's a question of understanding how as a group to synchronize in the game to achieve the same thing, because it's just a question of turning 5 fingers into a fist. You want to align on the same idea, because a good idea executed by 3 rather than 5 is a shit idea. A bad idea executed by 5 can still have a lot more potential than the greatest idea executed by 2. So the challenge in League of Legends, right, that is often underappreciated is the challenge of alignment. And sometimes you can have multiple ideas. Sometimes in the pursuit of the most precise idea, you can lose out on the connection that all 5 members need to have in order to execute on something. And this is what we are working on, right? It's like we had a very good week of practice leading into this one. And then as we tried something different, we went the Lilia direction, right? And this was just an attempt at trying something different, because we have a lot of things practiced out and champions that we're good at. And coming into this week, our conviction remains the same. Our goal remains the same. Our method remains the same, because we see the result in terms of how we improve, but it just hasn't been enough for us to actually win games. And the most important thing is to maintain that perspective, because you can only harvest what is good from your experience if you choose to do so. If your past experience is going to make your future experience worse, you have done nothing but stifle yourself. So the implication of the 0-6 scoreboard, if you play it just right, maybe this was the best blessing that could have happened to us, because now there's such a clear highlight of what is fundamentally wrong in the way we approach things. And the main thing that I can say is, in the team and in the staff, and also from upper management, there is full trust in the process, there's full trust in the players, and we still believe the same thing that we believed when we signed all of the contracts and we made this roster and made this staff, right? So the main thing for me, I said it on stream before, long before we were 06. Win to split is just a question of how you use your time and how you work on your fundamentals. How fast teams do that is largely dependent on the group dynamic. Sometimes things click very fast.
This is a longevity as well. Some of these orgs, rosters have been together.
It's like the Fnatic roster has largely been together. They had the June, G2
BDS.
as well, BDS as well. You know, there is a continuity there, and SK started very early, so they started very strong, and they pieced together a roster that, you know, makes sense to many degrees. You know, these are the aspects of competition. It's like the fact that the opposition managed to start off better than us is not the definition of the whole season. And in my career, always in summer, I have placed higher than I've done in spring.
I think the analogy I would use here is if Formula One was one lap, then having the starting positions that you do would be a lot more impactful than whether it was 36 laps, which is kind of what Winter Split is. It's 9 games, isn't it? So I think your starting position will not matter as much when you consider the longevity of what a year brings you.
Yeah, it's like the biggest pain, right? The biggest pain, because I'm very ruthlessly pragmatic. It's just like the KC fans, they travel out, right? They're in the studio, they're there giving the energy and giving the effort, showing the passion. They are there in the losses, and I just wish we could have given those guys that traveled on that day a lot more, you know? That is like the main thing. It's like, I wanted to give wins to Kamito, wanted to give wins to Rea as well, and you know all of the players too. It's like that is where a point of pain comes, but my translation of the experience is always going to remain the same. I'm going to we should do everything in our power to move forward and be problem solvers rather than letting our past weigh on us in a negative way. And that is the main challenge right now, right? But after the debrief, right, after the second week, it's like people were still very inspired, you know? It's like, we are 0-6. Fuck, man, we need to fucking do better.
This is players as well?
Or? Yeah, players too, you know? So everything remains the same for us.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, in terms of your assemblance of this roster, for me, from watching you and how you approached it, I know hearing you speak about Bo in his previous split on Vitality, I think it's interesting you ended up having him on this roster, because I very much viewed you as, it's almost like, and I think with Upset similarly, you see these players as puzzles to be solved in some ways. I think in regards to the way that I heard you talk about Bo, you were like, this is an untapped resource that no one else has figured out. How has that been as an experience? Because it's, you know, based on results based, a lot of people externally would say it's not a puzzle that's been solved. He's
of course,
clearly out of sync, and a lot of people might criticize that as being communication problems. I mean, that's something that people talked about in Vitality. I mean, obviously him speaking less English than the rest of his English teammates as well. But talk to me about Bo and then Upset in terms of regards to be untapped resources, puzzles for you as a coach.
I think I like to build rosters in a way where it might come with a high risk, but it also comes with a very, very high reward if you play things just right. I'd rather have a roster that will require a lot of hard work and figuring out, and then the reward is far greater than a roster that is easy to figure out, and then you run into the usual suspects that are at the end of the table, the top of the table, and it is what it is. It's like 2018 Vitality, like making that roster. It's like I could have made the roster with the usual players that would lose against the best in the region and create nothing of interest. It's like a team that would consistently get fourth, fifth, third, and some of those guys that have been around the block for a long time, but they have never really, broken through. And
kind of players that have the similar mentality to boxers that are put up against title challenges. You're the guy that you're going to fight before the title fight. And
pretty
you're
much.
Going to lose.
And there is an importance in that too, right? Because I think you need to have a little bit of a mixture of both. But I wanted to lean into the potential high reward because I wanted to be a team that people consider dangerous, right? It's like we set that team up in a very certain way, a set way that we are going to play our own way. We're going to commit to it, and we're going to be the southpaw of a league of 10 teams that box regular,
I
right?
really like that. Yeah.
And this year too, it's like with the lists of players that were available in the jungle position and in the AD carry position, it's like I want the players that on the right day, and in the right configuration and in the right setup, in the right coaching environment, will deliver, And I think that's the case for a player like Bo, For sure. The criticism is very fair. 0-6, our games have been quite tragic, right? It's like we have thrown winning positions. We have been stomped by Mad with our games in terms of the quantity have been awful. And the other teams are better than us. And I think it's perfectly fair to say that from any outside party. And I'm not going to try to sell some bullshit story of how, it's like, it was so close, we could have won those. No, this is not how like B1s work and not how League of Legends works. And in the end, it's just a question of how large of a variance can you create in your gameplay. You need to raise your floor and you need to raise your ceiling at the same time. And that variance, right, is determined by how well you figure out your fundamentals as a group. So we're working very, very hard to hammer this down. It's a process that will take time. But sometimes I can say that what is missing for teams can sometimes be small in the sense that sometimes the right sentence can make things right. And pursuing that actively,
or even just changing a word. I mean, we spoke about sun at the beginning.
Yeah. It's like finding the way for things to click requires everyone in the environment to put their effort in the same direction.
Sure.
This is what is crucial. Make sure that your effort and your trust and your belief of what the team could be, that needs to always be in the same direction. Because I've worked with teams where players are pulling in opposite directions. It's not that they are not working hard and trying hard. It's that they are trying to solve things not in unison with everybody else. Right? And that's the challenge of a team game, especially in a game that is changing every week. Right? Not every week, but every second week, right?
Yeah. I guess my question would then be, if we're to talk about Bo, who is sort of the proverbial prince that was promised of the EMEA region, kind of had that insane statistic of winning all those games in the LPL on a ridiculous team, and then coming to US, achieving rank 1 with a ridiculous win rate, and being this player that kind of came in and people were like, oh, he's had a pretty bad split here. And I think a lot of people will be looking at this split like, oh, it's going similarly pretty badly. You obviously see an immense potential in him, and that's what I talked about in terms of you see him as an untapped resource. He's almost like a what are the I forget what it's called in One Piece. There are like these weapons or whatever. Someone will know in the comments. But you see him as this untapped resource. Can you talk to me or speak on moments that you have during working him? Have you seen flashes of greatness that repay that faith?
Many times.
Can you touch on that?
I can say that for a lot of the players, honestly. Bo in particular, I think mechanically extremely talented. That's something that is insanely hard to teach. Like sometimes players' ceilings are determined by how good they are mechanically, and they can be at the mercy of metas. I think Bo as a player, it's like people can say, ha, Bo on tanks. I think sometimes it's like you're gonna look like a griefer if you have an idea that is good that people don't execute on, right? It's like when G2 was at their best, right? 2019, even last year, I think they had moments where they were so good, was because it's like when a single player took a decision, they did it with full trust that the players that he's playing with are going to commit to
This
the
is
same
this is a
decision.
conversation I had with Whippo about Hilly and Caps. People
Yeah.
talk about those players as having fallen off, and he was sort of put it from the framework of completely recontextualized the way I looked at it. It was like, have they fallen off, or do they have less trust in their new environments?
It's like, I think it's just a question of, it's like league, the windows that you get and the information that you need to digest as a player is that the windows are insanely narrow. And you, in the decisions that you make, you need to have a full commitment from everyone, and then everyone needs to align. So that's why it's like the line between running it down and inting and playing at the highest level
Pixel perfect
is very thin. That's why it's like every super player that has performed at the highest possible level, they have games where they go 0-12. Every single one of them.
It's because
like,
that first play that is so 50-50 went wrong.
and it's like there is a certain elevation of risk, and there is a certain perception of win odds. It's like playing your odds in a game where, like for example, there's this meme of Hilly ult flashing on Lulu and going in and just dying. It's like his perception in that moment is if the enemy bases and they're going to walk out on the map, they are going to have more items, we're going to have 3 inhibs down, and we don't have a chance. Right? Playing your odds, taking the right risks to increase your odds and to create an element of chaos to make the decision making for the opposing team a little bit more difficult. Withholding information and pressuring the enemy to do everything meticulously step by step so they can't work with the assumption of what you're doing is an insanely important part of playing League of Legends at the highest level. It's like the game of information is insanely crucial. And to circle back to the initial point, it's like for 5 players to align on those micro decisions, this is the challenge of making a team dynamic work. And this is something that we have the knowledge, we have the resources to piece it together. Now the main challenge is how do we align? How do you align? And it comes down to understanding like how people communicate and getting a clear, let's say, translation of what they actually mean when they are saying certain things in game. And I think that's a challenge always in Europe, because I mentioned the Vitality roster. It's like the Vitality roster, we had 1 Portuguese, 1 Italian, 1 Polish, 1 French, and 1 German. It's like they all have English as the
Sounds
second.
like the beginning of a joke.
We did quite well. We weren't a joke. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, like they walked into
I
a
know.
bar.
But nevertheless, at first, everyone had crazy accents. You know, it's like our voice comes. It's like we had the Italian mid laner, the French top laner, the Polish. It's like everyone has a very, very distinct way of communicating and a very, very different way of communicating. So that took time to figure out and hammer out. And after time, you assign responsibilities and people get used to each other.
There are some things that don't need to be said anymore.
Yes. And this is, the data that we are gathering right now, And in this particular dynamic, we couldn't figure it out fast enough. So we are now on a 0-6 scoreline. And now the main thing is that we maintain and we keep pushing on to figure this out. That's always the challenge of League of Legends and unlocking potential. Yeah.
That's good to hear. In regards to, I think you've given me an adequate answer in regards to bow and upset as kind of proverbial problem-solving devices. I think a lot of criticism has been levied at sort of your solo laners this split. And I think you as a kind of much more of a paternal figure as a coach than I think other coaches, in the sense of I think you shoulder a lot of responsibility for them, and I think you'll be the first one to kind of not cover up anything, but talk in a way that is authentic and honest about that. There's a lot of people that kind of have come out and said that they think that, I think a lot of the narrative is Cabo and Seiken haven't been able to handle the step up from LFL. It's a different level of competition. Do you put any stock into those words? I would imagine not, because you've obviously been the one that's selected them for this team. Do you think some of their individual performances are tied entirely to, like you say, the dynamic that you were talking about previously?
I think they have shown already that they're very, very strong players in terms of what I saw last year and also what I've seen in practice. And even in moments on stage too, I think sometimes circumstance that a team creates is very limiting in what you can show. So it's very, very hard to judge individuals, right? It's like, let's say Fnatic last year, right, in winter, they had a very dysfunctional bot lane, and that has a profound tremor effect on everyone else in terms of their individual performance, because what is going on as a player in certain moments is that sometimes you try to overcompensate for things, sometimes you try to push harder, sometimes you want to achieve more, or sometimes, you try to do things out of the norm. And then as things were figured out and things moving in a different direction, then all of a sudden, the players that were flamed, like Wunder, Humanoid, Razork, it's like when things were figured out for them and they were placed in the right circumstance, all of a sudden, they play good again.
That was always very interesting, that split, where people were like, oh my god, Razork's the worst jungler. And then suddenly Razork was the best jungler, and everyone was like, he's better than everyone.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how quickly that shifts.
And I say this because I know that these players are capable of far more than what we've shown. I know that they have the right attitude in order to succeed, which is crucial, really, really crucial. Saken, like Cabo, is someone that I worked with for very long, and he has remained the same, pragmatic approach. Saken is very stoic in how he deals with situations and how he moves on, and this is what has made him an EMA Masters champion and has gone through many roster alterations because he can find himself in those moments. And I think in regards to Tagamas as well, it's like he has shown so many strong qualities in terms of opinions about the game and how he basically shares these ideas with his teammates. I think, and I truly believe that this group has an immense amount of potential, and I couldn't care less what people think or what people say from the outside. I don't think it matters too much because I know from outside how little you know, so I can understand why they are reacting the way they are.
You don't take offense like you were talking about before. You don't take it personal.
No, I don't take it personal because that engagement is just a part of the game. It's like you don't get paid to play the game. You get paid to deal with shit. That's what it is, right? It's like if there wasn't noise, like if there wasn't this noise all the time, then like there's no product, right? There has to be noise. There has to be noise.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite games, Battle Right. Dead as shit. It's like no one would give a damn if I was good at that game. It doesn't matter. It's like, what kind of intrinsic value does that have in the conversation, right? It's like that game I really like, but League of Legends is a viewer game, an esport where there's a lot of noise. So that noise that it's in place is a very good thing. Yeah, it means things are alive and people care. So we are just gonna keep trucking on. We are aware of the things that we need to solve. Things will take time, and we view Winter Split as exactly that. Our period of training.
Trust the process. Yamato in. Not quite calling for Yamato out yet. You should do that. KC Fan TV. It's a free content idea for you there from the mind of Thorndike.
TV.
When's it going to end, Yamato? When's it going to end?
I'll be down for a little. I wish we had press conferences.
They really need to make that a thing. They did it in Montpellier somewhat, but no one was asking any questions, so I sort of was like one of the only people. I just went and asked like ridiculous questions. I
think I do well. Like whenever I'm in a press conference, I do really well. It's like I make fun of journalists.
That's how you make those Jose Mourinho moments, which I think the sport is so massively lacking.
I make fun of journalists that ask dumbass questions. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, you have to deal with fucking stupid journalists like me. I mean, that's just what you have to do. I think that pretty much concludes everything I want to speak to you about. I think generally we've covered a lot, and a lot of it is very interlinked.
Yeah.
And looking forward to the future. I mean, you've got 1 more week to play, 3 more games.
It's gonna be good.
Don't think you guys can quite make playoffs. There's an outside chance, though, isn't there? If you win every
We can,
single
yeah.
game.
With 2 wins, we need some luck. With 3 wins, probably we get a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So it's definitely still in our hands. So we're gonna work fucking hard.
We'll have to see how many specks of sand you have and whether they'll fall through your hands or whether you can make a sandcastle out of them. Thank you so much, Yamato, for coming
My pleasure,
on the
man.
podcast.
I really need to piss. It's crazy.
Yeah,
This
same.
water went right through me. Ruddy up or whatever.
Ruddy up or whatever, man. It's fucking difficult getting up from beanbags as well.